Hey guys, and welcome. Today what we have is another Star Wars project. Obviously we have the Death Star here. This kit's from AMT. The copyright on it was 2005. Now this is actually going to be my first commission job. I have sold many models, this already built models on eBay, and actually the person who's commissioned me to do this has actually bought several of my models on eBay, and we've been talking about doing this project. So it's going to be a bit challenging. Let's take a quick look inside the box what we have. Now as far as the actual model, it's really only 8 parts. It has 4 parts for each hemisphere. Looks to be roughly the size of a basketball, I'd say, maybe a little smaller. And we have a lot of raised detail. Now I try to research this model and only could find pictures of like one assembled model. Most of the YouTube videos only were like reviews of the kit or incomplete builds that were never, there was never a follow-up video, at least not that I found. Maybe there's one out there. So the idea for the kit is to obviously build it and paint it up, and but he also wants lighting on it, so we're going to do some lighting on it. Now I already have some thoughts and ideas of how to light this. I'm not really going to commit to that right in this moment because I'm still trying to figure out the details in my head of how to light it. The challenge is going to be on just really addressing the seams. That seems to be on the people who did at least start the project, that was a real challenge to take each hemisphere, put it together, and get those seam work done. So that's going to be a big part of it. I think that would be the biggest challenge, is just getting it all symmetrical and looking good. So we're just going to get started with that. And there's, like I said, there's only 8 pieces total, not including the display stand. Now I may use part of the display stand. The instructions say that there's actually 2 ways you can mount it. It has like a wall mount version, and also of course a freestanding mount. So I'm not going to do that. I also have to keep in mind, since I do have to ship this out, of making it in a way that it can be shipped safely. I'm thinking that I want to build it in such a way that it can actually detach from the stand, and that way when we ship it we don't have to worry about that part breaking free. So that's just my thoughts. Again, this display stand is actually kind of nice, has some raised detail, says Death Star, Star Wars. Maybe we can incorporate at least that section on it into the display base. Still a lot to figure out, but the first things first is going to approach this in the 2 halves, the 2 hemispheres, getting those completed, and then we'll attach those and we'll work on the lighting. So let's dig in. Alright, so I'm working on the construction here, and the directions say to connect all 4 parts of the hemisphere together, tape it together, and have it glued. I don't think that's a good way to address the seams that we're going to have and gaps. So I decided to do it each section at a time. Now I've started on this one, and I'm kind of doing it in parts. I've glued this bottom part. I'm taking my time to try to fit it together as much as I can to get to make the seam line minimal, which I think that's turned out pretty good right here. Now I've glued this part and I've given it overnight. I've added in, or overnight, time to dry, I've added in some strips of very thin styrene plastic to kind of extra support to make sure we have a nice solid weld there. So now I can move on to this top part. I'll probably have to add a little bit of super glue to initially hold it together, but then I'll add in some of my plastic cement, and I think that will minimize our seams and also help line it up properly. We're still going to have a little bit of work here. You can see where there's a little bit of gap, but that's very minimal. Right here it's pretty much invisible, so that's what I'm aiming for. And so I just got to attach this part, and then once we do that we'll move on to the next section, and then it'll be we'll do the next section after that. So that's my plan on that. Happy with how this part turned out here. I just have to move on to this part to get a nice seal on it. Alright, so we have the upper half of the Death Star all assembled. As you can see, I've added in a lot of support in here in different places. What I think is finally starting to work the best is I purchased this Insta set, and that just works with your super glue, your crazy glue, whatever you want to call it. And you put the super glue on first, you spray this on, and this makes that super glue set within a second or 2, so it's really fast. The problem I was having is, even though super glue sets fairly quickly, it just wasn't holding. I was holding this for a minute or so and it still the seams would just come apart. There's too much, I guess, pressure pulling it apart or tension pulling it apart. But this helps set it right away. I should have purchased this earlier, so this was a really wise investment. I should have done this much earlier. That really helped to kind of just put the glue in there and set it. Now I do come back and add in some modeling cement to make sure we get a good weld in there, and then add in some extra support. But so it's sealed up pretty good, and I'm just working on taking care of the seam lines now. This was the last joint that I put together, so it was probably the worst one to get to fit the all of it together. It wanted to bubble up right here, and so I've had to sand it down. And you can see where I've taken some Bondo glazing putty and just kind of get rid of those seam lines in between, so it camouflages where that line was at. Instead of this having a straight line come down here, glazing it over, make it look solid, covers up that line. And I'll probably address these two right here. But other than that, it's looking pretty good. Again, right here was a spot where it just didn't want to come together flush, so I had to put a little putty in there and get that. So yeah, that's looking pretty good. I started on the bottom half. I guess this is there was a spot back here where the display stand connects. We're just going to putty that over. We're not going to use that. I have some different ideas about what I'm going to use as a display base, but we're going to complete this and get it all together, and then we'll come back and start working on the what I have in mind for the lighting. Alright, still working on my two halves here, getting close to joining them together. I put over a coat of primer. Primer always helps bring out imperfection and flaws, things of that nature. So after I put over that first coat of primer, as you can see, found some areas that are kind of showing through. Still working on it. Lots of Bondo going on, but we're gradually getting there. The seam line used to be somewhere right in here, so I think we've got that camouflage pretty good. And still kind of, we have another one that runs right in here. It's hard to make out. So we're getting there. They're getting difficult to spot. You have to really look. If you really look, you can kind of make it out. We've lost some definition in the top here, but I think when we paint it over, it's going to turn out and look good. Painting's going to really bring this out. I think the paint job's going to be critical to make this look more like the Death Star. Just painting it right, and then of course doing the lighting. Now for the lighting, what I have in mind so far is I have this aluminum tube, very lightweight. I believe it was part of an old tripod, a really cheap tripod that broke. And then I have some of the strip lighting, as you see, adhered to the metal tube very nicely. I'll still probably put some super glue or some hot glue just to make sure it doesn't come off. Right now it's just using the adhesive from the actual strip lights. I still have to connect the wiring to it, and that's going to connect to the bottom of the Death Star, and we're going to connect that in there, and that should be plenty of light inside. We're going to light block this and then do a gloss white inside, so we get a lot of light bouncing around inside there. It would be nice and bright, so it should light up our fiber optics once we start drilling the holes in and adding the little bit of fiber optic line to give us all our little windows. So that's the plan for the lighting, and just working on getting all this, and then once we get the lighting tube connected and wired, we're going to make a little plug. Also, we'll be able to disconnect it, and then we'll have the tricky part of selling it all together. I anticipate that being very difficult and a lot of seam work once we get this sealed together, getting the two halves. Obviously, we're going to have a line right down the middle all the way around the model. So not looking forward to that part of it, but it's getting there, and we'll just keep trucking along. Alright, so here I'm just adding in the light blocking. I put in a coat of black, and this is flat and black, and I'll block any light that we have. It's going to be very bright inside here. Here's the top section that I already had the black coat inside, and now I've added in a gloss white coat, and that'll help reflect the light and make it nice and bright inside in there, so our windows light up real good. So I'm just going to paint this in the white, and then we'll start installing our lighting unit into the middle of the Death Star. Alright, I have my lighting element installed, and this is just a aluminum tube. I believe it came off an old tripod that was broken. It's very lightweight, and but it suits my need here quite well. And as you can see, I just have some LED tape wrapped around it several times. I forget how many lights are on there, but quite a number of lights that go around. So we have a nice lighted area all around, and with the gloss white, it'll reflect all in there. And as you can see, the wiring comes in, and it's going to plug to the outside here. And this will be the back of the kit. I've already kind of decided which will be the front part of the bottom half. So this will come out the back. And here we have it plugged in to our little adapter here, and that'll be our lighting. And that'll be, I've tested some fiber optics, putting some, drill a few minor holes, and if you can see right there, a few minor holes. This kind of tested. Now this is this backlighting right now. There's just holes there, but I took some fiber optic wire and put in there, and it really brings the light to the surface there. But we're going to do all that after we paint it. We're going to paint it and get it all sealed, or we're going to connect it and paint it, and then we'll come back and drill all the holes and add in the fiber optics. That'll be one of the last things we do. So now I'm just ready to start sealing the two halves. It's going to be a lot of work along the equator here, filling in this seam and making it look good. So first part is just connecting it. I did do a test fit prior to putting the lighting in there. It's kind of hard with all these tabs. I may cut away some of these extra tabs to get them all sealed in, because the top half also has a number of tabs, and they all have to kind of get fitted on the inside. And the first time I did it, I actually busted a seam on the bottom half, so I had to come back and reattach it, and then add some more support around that bottom half to make sure that doesn't happen again. So just getting ready to attach the two halves. All right, we've sealed the two halves of our Death Star, and as you can see, I've went ahead and added in some Bondo to it. And I just took strips of tape and ran it around the whole equator, leaving that little gap. Should have took a picture of the seam. It was really bad. It was really difficult to get this thing to seal, but for the most part, we have it a pretty good line around it. I think right in this area right here was probably the worst part, and I took super glue to kind of fill it in. Also, I took modeling cement to get a good weld. Fortunately, the seam right here was pretty smooth, so I took a lot of modeling cement. We actually got a good weld on it. And for the other parts that weren't wanting to fit together, I took the super glue, put a pretty good amount on it. You can probably see a little bit right here where it's actually sanded in. That's super glue right there. But I hold it in place, spray load the Instaset, and so I think we got it all pretty good. There's no actual trench. There wasn't much of one anymore. Anyways, it pretty much was just kind of a lower spot. There wasn't a real trench built into this. And to make it look nice and smooth, we've kind of had to make it, put this glazing putty all the way around it, this Bondo on it. And I've sanded it down. Now, this is the first strip of Bondo. There's some more, but pretty pleased the way it come out. The plan will be we'll just paint in a darker area, and that will represent our trench area that goes around the Death Star. But it's coming around and looking good, and I'm happy to have it sealed up. And after first cleanup is probably not as bad as I actually thought it was going to be, even though it was quite a bit, and there's still a bit to do. And then we'll start working on the painting. We'll prime over it, see how everything looks, and then we'll start working on the paint job of it. Well, now you can see that we've started painting on our kit. We finished up with all our sanding, filling in gaps, all the putty. That was a substantial part of this build. It took quite a while to get that to a point where I felt that it looked good. The base color was this light gray. It was done with this AS7 neutral gray USAAF from Tamiya. Happy with how that color came out. Just sprayed a good base coat over all of that. And now I'm working on the different panels. And as you can see, I'm marking it off. The model doesn't really follow the actual Death Star that you see in the movies as far as the lines and stuff. So I'm doing the best I can to represent how it's panelized. And I'm painting it with also Tamiya. This is XF53, and this is also a neutral gray. However, I've added in quite a few drops of black airbrush paint and mixed it in, And you can see right here the result that I have from it. This was a test ring. Pleased with that color. I want something dark but not too dark, just a darker shade of gray. I'm happy with that contrast that we're getting there. So I'm just moving on to marking it all up and getting this all painted that color. As I do a section, as I did this section, I also went back and sprayed a clear matte finish from Rust-Oleum just to kind of protect that, because I am masking over it. I gave it a day to dry, so hopefully won't peel off any of this paint that we put on there. And I'll do the same for this next step that we're about to paint. Okay, just updating you on the paint job. So far I'm pretty happy with the way it's coming out. Still have a little bit more to do here on the bottom section and a little bit more on the top, and then we'll have our primary colors on there and just keep going from there. Alright, we're in the process of putting our lights in, or open them up anyway. As you can see, I've drilled out a bunch of little holes all throughout here, and I'm just doing that with my drill. Now I have an adapter on my drill, so I can put in these really small bits, and you can find these on Amazon and eBay, things of that nature. Just a little pin vise adapter, and it has a really small chuck, so you can put these smaller drill bits on there. Now I'm doing different holes. I'm doing a lot of 0.75, a lot of 0.5, a little bit of 0.25 millimeter fiber optics on here. I don't want to show you too much because we're getting close to finishing up. But what I do is I drill out the holes, and then I take my fiber optic and I cut it into little pieces like this, probably about a 1/4 inch or so, just something so I can handle it. And I cut that out, and I mix it in with a little of my clear part cement. And what I usually do is I just kind of put that a little bit on a cup, and I'll take a little piece of the fiber optic, I'll put a little of the clear part cement on it, and then I can install it into the hole and just push it flush. That way we get all our windows nice and flush on there. So quite tedious job to get all these windows. We're probably looking at a couple thousand at least to do that. So you just do it one at a time, and that's how I'm getting all these holes filled. Hey guys, well here's the stand that I've made for our Death Star, and it simply is just a wood plaque that I've painted black, and this is a vinyl decal. You can get these off eBay and probably some other places. You see them often, people put them on the back of their cars and windows and stuff like that. You can get them with different sizes. I believe this was the 4-inch one. They're not very expensive. But after I painted it black, I placed that vinyl decal on there, and then I took a 2-part resin and mixed that together. It didn't take very much. I think I probably used half a cup or so. And I placed this plaque on a pedestal in the middle, and when I poured on the resin, I first sprayed it out with a paintbrush and all over, and then it'll self-level, but it's going to run over the edge. That's why you want to elevate it off, because once that resin dries, it's going to be rock hard and attach itself to whatever it's touching. So make sure whatever drops on, you don't want you want to put some paper or cardboard or something of that nature on there. But anyway, once that dried up, you will have to sand off the bottom. You'll have some drops that will come there. Fortunately, I have a belt sander. It made pretty quick work of that. This clear piece is an acrylic basketball display piece. You know, when I first talked about the Death Star in the beginning, I talked about how it was about the size of a basketball. So when I was looking for something to hold it, I came across this and decided to go with that. And sure enough, it fits very nicely, almost the exact dimensions of a basketball. So that worked out well. And that's just super glued onto place. And so I think that turned out pretty nice to make a nice little stand for our Death Star. All right, well here we go with our finished AMT Death Star. Once we finished up with all the windows, I placed a flat or a matte varnish finish from Vallejo with my airbrush. That got rid of the little bit of sheen that was on there and gave it a really nice finish, a nice look to it. Overall, it was a very challenging project, but I'm happy with the result. I want to thank Ray in Texas for contacting me and getting this project going. Ray, I hope you enjoy the Death Star here. It's certainly one that I would like to keep in my collection, but I'm happy that you'll have it. I hope you enjoy it. Maybe I'll revisit this one day and do one for myself. There's not a whole lot of these that I've seen done as far as videos and stuff. There is one that I know I've done, a lot different than mine. A modeler by the name of Michael Cogburn did one based off the Star Wars Incredible Cross-Section book. And just did an amazing job with the cutaway section, amazing reproduction of that photo artwork that was done. So just a nice, very nice work done on that piece. So anyway, here we are, and we're all finished. It was quite a lengthy process to do some of those things. I think I'm finished up. I think I initially said that there would be thousands. I think it wasn't near that amount. Once I got going, I felt like if I kept on with the first initial mini, that it was just going to be too busy. So I did start spreading out the windows a little bit more. That was a decision I finally made. And there's still quite a few, many hundred, probably 1,000 or so windows. I've never even bothered to count. But I just didn't want it to look like a disco ball with just lights overwhelming. So I didn't want that to be the focus. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the project. And until next time, everybody have a good one.